My very special guest is a dynamic keynote speaker and an employee engagement thought leader. He's dedicated to revolutionizing the way we lead with relationship. He challenges traditional norms to reshape the employee experience. He is Jason Lauritsen. Welcome to the show, Jason.
I am delighted to be here. Thanks for having me back.
I know. I'd love to talk to you about so many of these things. We've had a couple chances to bash brains together, and I just can't wait for another round. Let's go. Ding, ding.
Let's do it.
Well, I'll get it started with this one. You had made an observation, and I got to tell you, it really stopped me in my tracks. And you said, the way we treat people at work is broken. And I feel it, but I can't articulate as well as you can. So what is it that you're seeing when you say the way we treat people at work is broken?
Well, I think anyone who has friends, family, colleagues that work for someone else probably has heard a story recently about, something at work that's not working, a boss that doesn't treat them well, a place that they don't feel valued, where they don't feel like their voice is heard. I mean, this is right. This is stories we hear all the time. Recently I've been laughing because my 16-year-old daughter is working as a lifeguard this summer, and she gets off her shift every night, and my wife and I just sort of wait for it because she comes in shot out of a cannon, and she takes like 10 minutes when she walks in the house to just vent all of the stuff that happened at work that she couldn't talk about at work. And we both thought this was like, we've been thinking this is super funny for a while, and this happened in front of my sister and brother-in-law the other day. We thought this was so funny, and she came in and did this, and my sister-in-law said, yeah, that's what everybody who has a job does when they come home. They're like, apparently you guys have been out of the formal workplace long enough that you've forgotten that this is what happens. And so when I say it's broken, that's what I mean. It's not working for people. And that's what I've spent the last 25 years of my life trying to understand is, sure, it's not working. It's not been working for a long time for a lot of people. Why is it not working? And I think that's the work, because if we can figure that out, then we can start to fix it.
There was a time, I think, I don't know how long ago, I don't want to date myself here, probably 50s, 60s, you watch these sitcoms on television, and people just kind of just were like, yeah, what do you want? Work is work. But it seems like it has just gotten worse. It's almost like people are having a really hard time, and people are going through some things now. I have a tremendous amount of empathy for how much challenge people are absorbing. But the big sort of tragedy in all this is, like you said, we bring it home to our families. We don't show up at our best. It's hard to leave a bad day at work when the lines are so blurred anymore.
Yeah. And the tragedy in it is that it's all so unnecessary. And the problem that, well, I think the reason that it's so acute right now, Matt, and you could maybe have a different perspective on this, but for me, I believe the reason it's so acute today is that we'd been nursing along kind of a model of work or an approach to work and management that had not changed fundamentally too dramatically for like 100 years. And it wasn't working great. And then when the pandemic arrived and sort of blew everything up, right, scattered us out and really disrupted some of the features of this old system, right? Being able to work in the same place with people where you had this sort of line of sight that gave you some misplaced notion that you were managing someone because you could see them sitting in a desk staring at a laptop or whatever it was. Because we lost all of that and we got distributed and dynamics changed and things are very different now. The way we were working that wasn't working at all or wasn't working very well got really, really disjointed. And at the same token, people had a different experience of work where they had more autonomy, they had more flexibility. They, at least for some period of time, they saw leaders actually demonstrate care and communication in a way they hadn't before. And so employee expectations have changed. What they know is possible of work has changed. And when you put those two things together, that makes for a really tumultuous experience for a lot of people. And I want to be fair. There are some organizations that have seized this opportunity and are doing some really cool stuff, I think. But generally speaking, it's probably as broken in a lot of places as it's ever been.
Yeah, it's been this perfect storm of all the things that you shared, and additionally, are reconciling the role we want work to play in our lives. Plus the rise of AI and this increasingly technical sort of approach to work. It's really dehumanizing the work in many ways. So I do believe exactly what you said, which is the way that we're treating people is broken. And I think that there's this fundamental disconnect between many times when we talk about organizations and how they run, we focus on the technical bits around process and systems and technology. We don't think as much that we're asking people to do work together and come into close contact, and it gets really complex really quickly.
It does. And that was, I mean, I think for me, and going back to the why is this so broken? The insight that for me sort of cracked everything loose, and it gets at what you just said, was as you mentioned, I mean, I've been doing the work of employee engagement, studying employee engagement for a long time. And for a few years, I was at an organization that was where we were administering or doing the measurement for best places to work. So we were collecting, huge amounts of employee survey data and taking a look at it. And over the course of a few years of looking at what we were seeing that was driving employee engagement, broadly across, thousands of organizations across broad, all kinds of states and countries, it occurred to me as we were looking at these drivers that were bubbling up, that the things that were really driving employee engagement were things like feeling, I mean, this is going to be no news to anyone that has looked at an engagement survey results lately or knows engagement, but it's things like feeling valued, knowing that someone at work cares about you, trust, being trusted, and trusting the people you work for, those kinds of things, feeling appreciated. And those, the lightning bolt that kind of hit me is that what this data was saying was that the things that were driving engagement are relational, right? Those are all things that exist inside of relationships. If you think about those words and those constructs, those are generally the kinds of descriptors we use to talk about relationships with others. And that's when it kind of became clear to me that the fundamentally broken part of the way we've been approaching work is that employees, to be fully engaged, right, to be leaning in, to be giving their best, to be committed and loyal and all the things we want as employers, they are experiencing work as a relationship, and they need that relationship to be healthy, like a positive relationship, one that they, we think about what a positive relationship means. When that relationship is positive, they feel valued and appreciated and cared for and trusted, then they will give their best. They're engaged. The problem is the work model that we inherited from 100 plus years ago is built on treating work as a contract to be enforced with the employee. Right? Make sure we get our money's worth out of the employee. And that's how we treat people. And on top of that, to make matters worse, it's also on a model of work that grew out of kind of the Industrial Revolution, where people were very literally sort of stand-ins to do work that machines would later do, but hadn't been invented yet. And so you had this model of work that was designed around getting people to behave like machines. And then we were treating work like a contract, right, to enforce making sure we were extracting as much value out of our employees as we can for the money. And that gets played forward 100 years and just keeps getting updated into new formats. And on the other end of that are these employees going, yeah, but wait a minute, this doesn't feel very good to me, right? This feels like a dysfunctional relationship. And so therein lies the problem. And so I think right now it's really exacerbated because there's a lot of other factors at play, but that relationship is very tenuous right now.
And I think that the same thing that happens in real human relationships too is sometimes if you don't have the gumption to end a bad relationship, you just kind of withdraw a little bit. And I think we went from the Great Resignation and now we're into this quiet quitting and all these other catchy terms that we use. But people are like, if the job market's tight and I can't actually leave a bad relationship, I'll just check out. I'll just do less. I'll just invest less. And then you're in this kind of hollow existence. And then that's what you're bringing home to your family, like we were talking about earlier.
Yep. And it's grueling. And there is a lot of that. I mean, we've known, I mean, that has been there for a long time. If you look at the Gallup data has been telling us for a long time. We've had a lot of people that kind of have emotionally and on some level psychologically disengaged from the organization, but they keep showing up to work. They keep doing just enough. Right. And thankfully for those employees, we are, as a, sort of broadly so poor at performance management that kind of is allowed. And so you end up in this limbo phase where it's not working for you as an employee. It's not really working for the organization all that well, but we don't have the systems or the skills or the courage or whatever is missing to resolve that, right? To liberate ourselves, to go find something that works better. And that's a miserable place to be. I mean, being stuck in a relationship that isn't meeting your needs, but yet you can't, for whatever reason, find the gumption to leave it, is a bad spot.
Yeah, and stuck goes both ways. And I love that term, because I talk to a lot of leaders that they kind of feel stuck too. They know, I think I talk to average leaders and they're like, yeah, I know people are supposed to be happy at work and be engaged. And I get the reports and the reports aren't great, but we have a job to do. And we have fewer people than ever because of the economic tightening. And how am I supposed to get the results? And I got people breathing down my neck. So my question is that these leaders, a lot of times they may want to modernize their approach and do some of these, more advanced things that haven't been 100 years old, but don't always follow through. So when we're one of those leaders, it's like, I know I need to be doing the new stuff, but I still got to put up the results. Like, what are some things that are holding us back?
Well, first off, I think that oftentimes we think that kind of like what you said, and I hear the same thing too, that there's this notion that to engage our employees fully, to sort of make sure that they are taken care of, that this is some kind of new iteration of leadership or management, that there's some sort of new magical approach. And what I find is that the reason people aren't engaged is not because there's some magical thing you don't know how to do yet. It's really that we're not doing the fundamentals correctly. And so the thing that I most frequently remind leaders, well, there's two pieces, but one of them is, if you're in that situation you just described, generally speaking, when the thing that people are craving the most and that they need the most, both to be more engaged but also to perform better, is clarity. It's clarity about what's expected of them in their role, clarity about how their performance is going to be measured, clarity about even what you need from them as a manager and what they should expect from you as their manager as they perform. And when I say clarity, I mean, sure, you need to talk it through, but when I say clarity, what I'm talking about is actually putting it in writing, really discussing it, making sure that there's crystal clear alignment between you and the employee. Because what happens when you do that work, even when things are intense, even when things are, there's increased expectations, is that people get really focused. When people know what's needed, when they are clear on what they're expected to do, it's amazing how often they will go do it. I believe that people fundamentally, when given the means and opportunity to do so, they want to succeed, right? They want to be successful and earn your respect, earn your admiration. And so they want to do the right thing, but oftentimes they just don't know what to do. And so I always tell people, start with clarity, make sure people are clear. And then the second piece of that is then making sure that you're in regular conversation with them about what's expected, so that they understand what kind of progress they're making relative to those expectations, to that clarity, whatever that looks like. So if they know what's expected and they know where they're at relative to that expectation, I find that resolves about 95% of the issues that we have with people. And so it's not magical. It's not easy. I mean, this is work that requires some real diligence and focus, but very practical and very powerful. If you do those two things, you'll resolve a lot of other issues.
Yeah, I think that in addition to that, when you really look at being human with people, right? The other part of that is I'm being clear. We're having conversation about it. I can show you your progress. We can talk about where maybe you need me to unblock some stuff or answer a question or help you make a decision, or where, things are working well or not. And I think that people are really also, there's this backlash happening right now against these overly engineered, sort of highly polished experiences. And I think wanting to be treated like a human with dignity and respect at work too shouldn't be too much to ask. But I think when, the purse strings tighten and the economy tightens and there's fewer people and we're still trying to drive the same old numbers, and it takes us and gets us out of the mindset of, I've got time to even be human. I talk to managers that are like, who's got time to have all these, soft conversations? You're like, you don't have time not to. What are you talking about?
Yeah. Yeah. It's, this is probably the thing I talk about the most is teaching leaders and managers how to effectively check in with their people, because this is another thing that I think is an idea that we have, is that to have these conversations with people, to check in, to sort of create these human interactions with people is really time consuming, right? And we're too busy for that. And the truth is, it doesn't take a lot of time if you're doing it in the right way, if you're doing it with the right intention. So if you really care about it, and I'll tell you that, I'll just give you a little snippet of this, the process that I teach. And I think this is the piece that most people tend to get wrong, is when you're doing a check-in with someone, I mean, first off, you have to care. So let's start there. To your point, Matt, you have to, people, the most important relationship that the employee has with the organization is with their direct manager. Their manager is the face of the organization. And so, like it or not, time for it or not, you have to foster that relationship and be in conversation with people if you want them to be engaged. There's no shortcut, no way around it. Most effective way to do that is to be regularly checking in. And a check-in doesn't have to be long if you do it correctly. And the most important first step of an effective check-in is asking what I call a great question. And a great question is one that the answer to that question sort of demands a follow-up to the response, whatever that is. Because oftentimes when we're checking in with people, we just do this drive-by where we say, how are you, or how's it going, or whatever, and you get nothing. You get fine, good, whatever, and there's no real meaningful exchange. And so there's no building of relationship. There's no moment of humanity. But if you ask them a question that requires some kind of a response that then almost sort of pulls you into a conversation with them, then all of a sudden you've opened up now this moment of human connection. And the question that my go-to question that I talk about the most, and that I often say, just start here, is taking how are you? And instead of asking that question, it's asking, hey, how are you today on a scale from 1 to 10? 10 being couldn't be better, 1 being couldn't be worse. Because when I ask that question, all of a sudden, instead of it being just a passing, I'm fine, that doesn't tell you anything, suddenly when they tell you whatever that number is, they'll stop usually for a second, and it kind of takes them back on their heels a little. And then they'll say, well, I'm probably, 6 today. Well, now you're into, that's an invitation, right? So you can now ask a follow-up question that gets you into a conversation about something that really matters. If they're at a 6, that means there's some good stuff going on. There's probably something that's not going great. You be curious, ask the questions okay, that's interesting, on a 6 mixed bag. So what's going well? And then they'll tell you what's going well. And so what's not going as well? What's keeping that number at a 6 instead of an 8 or a 9? And then they'll tell you. And if you listen and pay attention, in the space of 10 minutes, you can have probably a more meaningful conversation with that person than you've had in months. And they will tell you what they need. You'll learn about them. You'll have this moment of connection if you ask questions and you really listen. it'll give you the opportunity to give them everything they need. And so it's really simple, but you have to be really intentional about those conversations, and it doesn't have to take a ton of time.
And I think you started off earlier when we were talking about almost a parenting situation. Kids don't need us to solve all their problems. Sometimes they just want to be heard. You said, your daughter wanted to vent, for example. So
Yep.
somebody comes in with a 6 and they're like, well, I'm having this real problem. There's a lot of stress in my house, my in-laws, whatever. I'm not here to fix your problem, but I'm here to listen. Like I can help, I can relate to you. I can say, that happened to me once. Like we can have a human moment, right? And
Yep.
then the work will still be there, and it'll actually get a lot easier. The work will, if we're human with one another first.
And we don't have to, I mean, that is the other thing often that I will coach managers and leaders on, is like, your job isn't to be their therapist and try to solve every issue that comes. Sure, if there's a work issue, if there's an obstacle they're facing that they need you to move, great. Or there's a need they have that you can meet that is your job, great, do that. But oftentimes, the question you can obviously at the end of a check-in, I say, offer support or offer encouragement, whatever is needed. And so usually it's either, hey, how can I help, or how can I be of help? Or the classic kind of Brene Brown question that I've heard her teach many times was, hey, what does support for me look like for you right now? And sometimes they'll say, you know what, I don't know. Or I think it's just helpful to talk about it, right? To your point, sometimes they just want you to know what they're going through so that you can hold space for them. If they're not at their best that day, you know what's going on, and you can just be aware of what's going on. And so really powerful interactions. And it's, like I said, it can be pretty efficient if you get skilled at it.
And sometimes you have to ask the same question over a series of sessions before someone's like, you know what? You've asked me that before, and I always appreciate it. This time, there is something you can do for me.
Yep.
Oh, great! So it's not like it's just, these aren't silver bullets. They're not magic. Like they always work. But I think always being willing to open that door again and again and again. Eventually, they're going to walk through it.
That's right. Consistency is powerful. Builds trust.
I think culture is something that you know a lot about too. And I guess I have this question, like if I want to be a relationship oriented leader, I want to talk about these types of techniques, but what happens when I have that mindset, but I'm also working inside of a really transaction focused, high on the metrics, really mechanical approach to the business? If that's the culture, what can I do if I really want to, kind of be human and be relationship oriented in that context?
I recognize what I'm about to say is challenging. I've worked with and coached some leaders over the years that are in that exact spot. I was in that spot a few times, and there's a real tension. The way that I always thought about it was that, there's an organizational culture that oftentimes, depending on how big the organization is, I might not be able to have any impact on that, right? That's flowing from someplace much higher up than where I'm at on the in the org chart. But what I know is that I can interrupt that for my team. I can create an experience within my team that maybe is a little bit different or helps them equip. And so the thing that I always thought about is, when we think about work as a relationship and trying to foster an employee feeling like they're in a healthy relationship with work, I don't know what the percentage is, but I know that a big percentage of how the employee feels about their relationship with work has an awful lot to do with their relationship with you as their manager. And so really getting, making time to be with them. So whether that's check-ins, one-on-ones, really getting to know your people can go a long ways, right? If they feel like you're invested in them and they have a relationship with you, that can help mitigate a lot of other things. The other thing you can do is help to make space and to do things the way you manage your team to build and foster relationships within the team. Because Matt, I'm sure you've seen this data too, that one of the things that has shifted over the last 10 or 15 years is the importance of the peer-to-peer relationship in impacting engagement, and how I feel about the work relationship has actually been on the rise. And in some studies I've seen, actually how connected I feel to my peers is almost as important to my overall engagement or satisfaction as my relationship with my manager. And so as a manager, if you can foster good relationships with individuals, with you, and then also help them to build connectedness and support. And maybe they're not all going to be best friends, but you at least foster the kind of connection where they feel like they're, working towards the same mission and they share some values as a team or whatever that looks like. Those are things you can do to create kind of a subculture within the culture. That's oftentimes, if you're in a culture that isn't great or isn't human, that's one of the best things you can do to help kind of interrupt that for your people.
Yeah, you can still have a strong team dynamic even inside of a culture that's a little bit more fragmented, so to speak. Yeah, that's true. I like that. And I think that's the thing is like, sometimes it happens. You're part of an organization that might be going through some stuff, or maybe, whatever it might be. Ship's taking on water, but you've got people in your lifeboat. You worry about your lifeboat. They're going to be okay. And you can't fix everything. You can't solve all the problems that they're going to be exposed to. But I think it doesn't take away our responsibility to be leaders. And that means, yes, getting the job done, of course, but it also means taking care of our people. Yeah. And that's an opportunity that we always have.
One of the things that's really dangerous when that kind of thing is happening is, as a manager, it's really tempting to kind of throw your hands up and say, well, what can I do? Mm-hmm. And then sort of become part of the problem, right? You're just letting it pass through to your people. And what I would suggest in that case is you have a choice to make, right? If you're going to be a leader of people, then the experience, though, the people you're responsible for are having is on you. That is your accountability. And so either you make the decision to make it work and create the best experience you can for them so that they can perform at their most optimal for the organization, or you should really opt out, right? And go find either another organization that aligns for you and how, the kind of culture you want to work within, or maybe find a job where you're not leading people if you don't want to carry that bag, because it is an awesome responsibility to have the privilege of leading and managing other humans at work. And the success with which you do that has profound impacts, not just on their work performance, but on life satisfaction, mental health, and all the rest. So it's an important job, and it has both incredible positive or negative impacts depending on how you choose to approach it.
Yeah, and I like the idea that we never forget those leaders who really helped us when we were in a tough spot. These are the things that we really take with us, and it's one of the more rewarding things if you get later on in your career and somebody reaches back out to you and says, "Hey, all those years ago when you gave me this tip, it really stuck with me." And you're like, "Oh, geez, you remember that? That's amazing." So it's like even in the more challenging times that we are currently going through right now, some really magical human relationships and powerful connections can really see people through and get them, back to a spot where they really want to get back to.
Yeah. When you put the relationship first, when you build that relationship and invest in people and the relationship you have with them, everything else about leadership and management gets a lot easier and a lot more clear to navigate, and you'll be shocked how people will elevate for you, right? I mean, I think that's the counter to, kind of the point you made earlier, the sort of, it seems counterintuitive when you're really busy and there's a bunch of pressure coming down that you just want to sort of let that pressure flow through you onto your people and just push down on them thinking that's going to help somehow. And the reality is when that pressure is coming down, the counterintuitive action that you need to take is really doubling down on those conversations with people and being in relationship and trying to understand where they're at and what they need and fostering and building that trust, because that's what will then encourage them to elevate, to sort of lift up and meet that pressure and perform in ways that maybe will surprise you. But you're not going to get that kind of investment of engagement and talent if you're not investing in the relationship. It just doesn't happen. So
true. Relationship. I mean, I really love the way that you frame it, and you've drawn those parallels with, work itself as, a form of relationship, which is amazing. And I give us a hard shift on this one. I thought we could play a fun game here. I'm trying this new thing, Jason. It's probably going to be a disaster. We'll try it. I call it, "Are we smarter than AI?" So we're going to do a trivia question, AI generated. I'm using Gemini. They're not a sponsor of the show or anything. I think that's the Google one. And I'm going to say we're going to do a trivia question about long-term relationships.
Okay.
Let's see what AI says. It says this could be a total disaster. Traditionally, what is the gift typically given for a 50th wedding anniversary, Jason? I don't know if I know this one.
50th. That's a golden anniversary, I think. So it's got to
Yeah.
be something gold,
Oh,
right?
let's just say gold. Let's see what
Yep.
happens with gold. Here goes. We're going to find out if we were right or not. That's right. It's gold, symbolizing the preciousness and enduring strength of the marriage. There's got to be a parallel to work with that one, right? The preciousness and enduring strength of work relationships. Why do we not have this? Let's have this.
Listen, anybody that makes it 50 years in a job should get some gold, like a whole chest of gold. Like I think thinking like treasure chest of gold for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Well, I'll give you an easier question, which is this one. Jason, where can my listeners go to learn more about you?
The easiest place, well, I'll give two places. One is my website, which is jasonlauritsen.com. And the other place is LinkedIn. That's where I'm most active and interactive. So if you want to come interact with me, that's the best place to do it.
There you go, listeners. I got those links for you in the show notes. You're only one click away from connecting with Jason on his website or on LinkedIn. Jason, always a pleasure to talk to you. Thanks so much. I learned something every time.
Matt, it's my honor to be here. I appreciate the invite.